This time the Bucks have home court, which is where they will be for Game 1 on Sunday. You can see that game on ABC at 1 Eastern time. Milwaukee won the season series 2-1. All three were close, but Boston holds a 5-1 edge all time in playoff series. My first question for you guys regarding this series has absolutely nothing to do with the Bucks, no offense in particular. It has entirely to do with Boston. Based on what you saw in the first round against the Pacers, the sweep of Indiana, do the Celtics look something like what most of us expected when the season began?
No, I can't say that because when the season began, we thought the Celtics would be the runaway favorites in the Eastern Conference. Now, the Celtics did look like they put some things together. I will give them credit for sweeping the Indiana Pacers, but that Pacers team without Victor Oladipo just really couldn't compete with what the Boston Celtics had. So I didn't learn much about that first-round matchup, but I did like the fact that Boston took care of business. The games are a little bit closer than I would have liked, but it's the playoffs, and, you know, Indiana was playing with pride. But I didn't learn much, and I can't say they look like the team I thought they would be because I thought Boston would be much more dominant at this point in the season.
All right, Brendan's still not convinced. Where are you on the Celtics?
Yeah, I'm not convinced. I mean, I'm more encouraged with what I saw, that they took care of business. They were able to sweep this team. I agree. I mean, Indiana, just it's admirable what they did.
Not a lot of firepower there.
Not a lot of firepower. I mean, it's admirable what they had done the rest of the regular season with Oladipo out. And they didn't have that one sort of statement game against Indiana where they kind of just, stuck it to them and beat them by a large margin. They were okay. In terms of what those expectations we all had for Boston at the start of the season. But they're going to have to go from okay to great in this next series for sure. And certainly Kyrie Irving's going to have to play well. But as a unit, I mean, defensively they've been solid. Offensively, still want to see the collective unit click like they did last year in the postseason at times. And like we thought they would this year. So improvement, but not enough at this point, in my opinion, to beat and upset the #1 Milwaukee Bucks.
Well, the Bucks were not challenged by the Pistons, also hampered by injury with Blake Griffin kind of hobbling around. Giannis Antetokounmpo went for 31, 10, and 4 on 59% shooting against Boston this year. How should the Celtics deal with him or try to deal with him in this series?
Well, they had success last year. It was a 7-game series last year. In the conference semifinals, and Giannis, I thought what they did and it was very successful was they were able to crowd the paint. Al Horford at times guarded Giannis, and Al was big enough and a good enough defender to kind of stay in the paint, and Giannis wasn't able to out-physical him. I think a couple things have changed since then, though. One, first of all, Giannis is better. He's just more confident. He's stronger. He's seen it all. A lot of teams have played him that way, much like how Al Horford played him last year. And then the style of play is different now. Coach Bud has come in. They're shooting more threes. You have Robin Lopez there. They spread the floor. So it's a different Bucks team. I think if you're going to play them one-on-one, you just can't let the other guys get off. And Boston has capable defenders who can guard their guys on the perimeter, but it's going to have to be, they're going to have to play some defense. And, if Giannis goes off, he goes off.
Yeah, how much does the new approach by Mike Budenholzer change the scheme for Boston with all those shooters now spread out waiting for feeds from Giannis?
With this new looks Buck team, this new strategy that they have, it becomes hard to guard Giannis because what you used to do is pack the paint. Well, now packing the paint on Giannis becomes problematic because he can pass the ball to his teammates, and they have multiple shooters when you talk about guys like Middleton, Ilyasova, Mirotic, the list goes on and on. Bledsoe shooting the ball better this year as well. So how you guard him, it's kind of tough. The first thing I think you have to do is kind of the opposite, G. Hill, of what most people want to do. Most people want to take a step back and give Giannis space. He does an excellent job of taking up that space. I think you want to press into him. Not so far that he can just drive by you easily, but I don't want him to have the space to move around freely and to get his moves off and to get ahead of steam. I still think your teammates have to help you out. You have to build a wall, protect the paint. That's the most important part of the basketball game. But on top of that, when you run out, you can't be afraid to just run at your man and run him off the three-point line. So basically, you're packing the paint, and then you're spraying out to the perimeter, hoping that you run the next Bucks player off the three-point line. I think that's what you have to do against Giannis right now. I'm not saying that that's going to lock him down, but I think if you do that and mix in a couple of double teams and definitely get back in transition, limit his easy buckets, you might be able to maybe frustrate him for a quarter or two.
Yeah, different team. Bucks hit nearly 400 more threes than last year's team. Malcolm Brogdon out for at least games 1 and 2, still dealing with that plantar fascia tear. Marcus Smart for Boston is practicing now, but his return from that oblique injury is still very much up in the air. 76ers and Raptors get to work in Toronto on Saturday. Nick Nurse is already trying to figure out Philly.
That's kind of what we're studying right now, is how will our matchups look. And you got to go back and review all that stuff to see what looks good and what doesn't look so good. If you looked at all 5 of those positions, there's a lot of teams in the league that would take any one of those guys.
Like we're going up there with, pretty impressive starting 5 that we all talk about. And the only downfall to that, and it has to be considered, is you're playing against a team that's been with each other for the large majority of the year, and acquisitions like Marc Gasol coming in, that's their little boomerang in the flow of what was an annual group, Danny, Kawhi, and so on. And so we don't have that. We do not have that. But what we do have is firepower. But I think that our experience and that side of it certainly will help us.
Just the second time these franchises have ever met in the postseason. The Raptors took 3 of 4 in the regular season. I don't know if that means anything. Tobias Harris wasn't on the Philly roster for any of them. Kawhi didn't play in the lone Sixers win after averaging 30 in the others. Give me the priority for each team going into this series. We'll start with Philly.
Well, the priority for Philly is going to be to try to limit, obviously, Kawhi Leonard and what he's able to do in the mid-range. And so I think that's maybe sometimes mixing up defenders. Maybe sometimes you can even run somebody at him. But Kawhi is very good. He's gotten adept at coming off, changing speeds. He shoots his fall-aways, his fade-aways. And he's become a very good player in that mid-range. And so if I'm Philly, I want to maybe put Jimmy Butler on him, make those situations tough. Tell Jimmy Butler, I want you to challenge Kawhi, get into him a little bit. We're not going to be afraid to send some help and make some of these other guys like a Kyle Lowry or a Pascal Siakam hit some shots from the perimeter. I know they can do it, but sometimes I want to see them do it and give a different look and force some of those guys to beat me instead of letting Kawhi beat me in the mid-post, because we know in the mid-post he's very, very efficient.
And Brandon, conversely for Toronto, I think defensively, you're a defensive team. Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, Siakam, Gasol inside, Ibaka. These guys take pride in defending, and that's something that they're good at, and they're going to be tested. And they're going to have to take the individual challenge, each one of them, guarding, Tobias Harris, Jimmy Butler, of course, Joel Embiid.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, that guy, exactly. And Ben Simmons and what he does and his versatility. And so I love that matchup. I love the chess sort of match that between Nick Nurse and of course Coach Brown. But who's going to guard who, and who's going to be able to contain Embiid and what he brings to the table, Ben Simmons and his ability and his versatility. And so I like it. I like they have the pieces, they have the length, they have guys that are capable, but they're going to have to really lock down and defend collectively as a unit, but also the individual matchups out there on the perimeter and inside.
Got to figure out how they're going to figure out how to guard Embiid. Embiid right now, he's giving about 25 points in 25 minutes.
That's going to be really interesting.
Talk about efficiency.
Toronto has the big bodies, obviously, that Brooklyn did not. And going back to Marc Gasol's days in Memphis, Embiid, 34% shooter, 14 points a game against those Memphis Grizzlies defense with Gasol in the middle.
It's a much different Embiid now.
I don't know if it translates or not, but it's
different animal now.
Sure.
Gasol's a little older.
Ahead of that series.
Yeah, Gasol's older than Embiid.
There's no Zebo.
Yeah.
A lot of differences. Coming up, Lou Williams and the Clippers have not been content to leave the playoffs quietly, how they've managed to force a Game 6 against the champs. It's probably just one of those weird historical quirks, but the Nuggets have never won a road Game 6 in 6 tries in their history. Reversing that trend for Nikola Jokic and Denver means closing out the Spurs in San Antonio tonight. The Silver and Black face a second straight first-round exit unless they can revive their ailing offense tonight. Hey there, everybody. Welcome in. It's game time from our Atlanta studio. Good to have you along with us here on a playoff Thursday night. Brendan Haywood right there. That's the Hall of Famer, Grant Hill. I'm Matt. 10 teams still alive in the playoffs after the Rockets finished off Utah last night. The Nuggets have a chance to pare that number down by 1 if they can continue trending positively against the Spurs tonight in Game 6. Mike Malone reminded us after Tuesday's Game 5 win that this is Nikola Jokic's first taste of the playoffs, and it tastes good so far. He's averaged better than 20 points, 11 boards, and 9 assists, and turned it over just 2 times per. Jamal Murray has gotten better as the series has progressed, and he's averaged 24 points on 57% shooting over the last 2 games, both Nuggets wins. On the other hand, surprise star Derek White is going the other way. Since a career-high 36 in Game 3, he scored a total of 20 over the last 2 games on 8 of 19 shooting. Denver's bench is also leaving a mark, outscoring San Antonio so far by 35 points in the series. Malik Beasley is a big part of that group, and earlier today, he stopped by Playoff Central Live.
We're here. It's 3-2 now. The experience has been amazing. I think we've done really well as a young team, showing that we can play in this league, and we want to continue that tonight and try to close out the series.
So you guys have a ton of balance. 7 players scoring in double figures in Game 5, not to mention shooting the deep ball. 14 threes in Game 5. How valuable is having that type of firepower?
Well, we haven't been knocking down shots lately, and last night or the night before, we did a really good job. So we're staying with it, moving the ball, shooting it with confidence, and playing well. And that's what we got to do to stay together, especially against a Spurs team like them.
Offensively, you've been impressive, double figures in 3 of the 5 games, but defensively, you all are 26-2 when holding the opponent under 100 points. How difficult is that going to be to maintain that intensity against the Spurs, who are pretty great on their home floor?
Oh, they're great on the home floor, but we just got to stay together, communicate, get back in transition, not let the crowd get into it too easy. So we're going to try to get it on 100 tonight and get another win.
I remember Denver ended a 14-game losing streak in San Antonio with their Game 4 win. This is the youngest playoff team in the Western Conference, and Mike Malone made a point of saying it the other day. Jokic has never been through this before. He's their best player. He's their all-star, and he's been awfully good in this series. What's impressed you, first of all, and what can the Spurs throw at him at this point in the series?
Well, I mean, it's been more of the same, but what we've seen throughout the year. I mean, obviously, he's a young player, first time on this particular stage, but the way Denver plays, so much of their offense is through Jokic and his versatility, his passing. It's infectious. It spreads. Everyone plays that way. And so he has, settled down and found a comfort zone, not trying to do too much, but playing within himself, doing a good job defensively on the boards as well. And just playing like he's played throughout the season.
Yeah.
And when you said it's the youngest team in the playoffs, I think the 8th youngest playoff team of all time. Ever. And they have adjusted to some adversity, getting down in the series, righting the ship, playing good basketball on the road Game 4, taking care of business Game 5. Now this will be their toughest task, trying to close out a team that's well coached and experienced like the Spurs.
Yeah, when you talk about what can the Spurs do to Jokic, I think the biggest thing they have to focus on is trying to involve him in multiple screen and rolls on the other end to try to wear him out, to try to make him tired. Because when you look at what he does offensively, you can't really double the Joker because they use him all over the court. They use him in pick and pop situations to dribble handoff and shoot the ball. They use him in the high post sometimes. They use him in the mid post. They'll run some cross screens for him to get him down on the block. So Coach Malone does an excellent job moving him all around the court. It's hard to say, hey, we're going to double this guy here because sometimes it's not great areas to double a player in, especially in the middle of the court. But what you can do, try to make him tired. Try to make him feel you a little bit. And I would involve him in multiple screen and rolls, and especially situations where he has to run from one side of the court to the other. I might set a pin down on Jokic to have the man that he's guarding set a screen on the other side of the court just to get him moving, constantly involved in the action, and try to get into his legs that way.
Yeah, it's interesting because he is one of those guys, as you guys know, who just plays at his own pace. There's very little speeding up Nikola Jokic. Jamal Murray's performance obviously was a big story the first couple of games of this series. He really struggled. Then he got it going. He's been really good the last couple of games. How has he gotten better, or what is he doing differently?
I think he's just playing with more confidence. And the playoffs are a different monster. Young players always hear the playoffs are a different animal, and they think that veterans are just talking. And then you get into the playoffs and you see the game slows down. You see more attention to detail. You see that it's a little bit harder to score and get to your spots against teams. And so I think Jamal Murray, it took him a couple games to really get used to that. But when he's playing well and he's aggressive, they're playing well. And no matter if he's making shots or missing shots, he has to still continue to be that same aggressive player that he's been all season long. I like what I've seen from him in these last couple of games.
In Game 4, Mike Malone made a lineup change, brought in Torrey Craig to the starting lineup. That put Will Barton on the bench, and Malone has had a lot of praise for Barton in terms of how he's reacted to that. But in general, the Nuggets bench, as we just showed you a moment ago, is outplayed San Antonio's. What do you like about what they've brought?
Well, in part, you have a guy like Barton who's more than capable. Now he's going against second units and brings a scoring component, an aggressiveness. He's kept his head and not sort of pouted or felt sorry for himself, but has come out and played well. But yeah, they have really just had their way against San Antonio's bench. And then, of course, Clark has done a masterful job of at least slowing down White White was having his way those first 3 games, but inserting him into the lineup, he's done a really good job on White. And it's a lot to ask for a second-year player and Derek White to be a go-to guy like he was in Game 3. But they're going to need him. They're going to need him, San Antonio, but Clark's done a fantastic job.
Well, Greg Popovich has talked about Derek White and how this is a learning experience. He's not putting too much on White in terms of expectations, because remember, this is a guy who averaged 10 points a game during the regular season. The 36 was the anomaly, not the norm for him. But one big change, Brendan, is they brought in Gary Harris and moved him over onto White. And that's made a huge difference after that 36-point game.
Well, Gary Harris is a very good defender, and what he does is he's doing a great job of keeping White in front of him. Now, this time he goes around the screen, but he continues to get in on the play, and he's able to affect the shot. Now, this time, look, he's navigating the screen. He sees the communication, goes underneath the screen, slides his feet, moves his feet again. The whole thing that Gary Harris is trying to do is to make sure he stays between White and the basket. White is excellent when he gets to the basket. The jump shot is really not his strength right now. Gary Harris helps right there. Now, excellent closeout. Doesn't over close out, doesn't over help. Moves his feet and continues to challenge White at the end of the play. And what we saw when White got off in that game where he had the big game, I saw a lot of bad closeouts. People were responding to White like he was a knockdown 3-point shooter, and that's not the case. You have to close out short, meaning you have to just take a couple of steps, chop your steps, and make White come to you. And then when he comes to you, slide your feet. Gary Harris does the best job of anybody on Denver of guarding Mr. White.
Remember, White was 8 of 9 in the restricted area in that Game 4. He's only taken 10 shots in the restricted area in the 2 games since and only knocked down 5 of those so far. San Antonio is an outlier offensively, so mid-range heavy. They don't take a lot of three-pointers, even though they led the league in three-point percentage. But in this series, since Game 1, they're shooting 31% from 3, 30% on, quote, open threes. At some point, don't they just need to hit some shots to extend this thing?
Matt, you're right on the money there. I mean, they've had open looks. They can't convert. They've shot a high percentage, not a high volume during the regular season, but certainly a high percentage. But so much of what they do, particularly with DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, is in the mid-range. And that's where those guys like to operate and dominate. You see, White, we talked about earlier, he's not a three-point shooter, so it puts a lot of pressure. But, yeah, they are due for a game where they can knock down some shots. Game 4, they struggled. They didn't hit anything outside the paint after the first quarter. So if they can knock down shots, they have a chance to extend this and take it back to Denver for Game 7.
They were 7 of 24 in Game 5 from three-point range, and not a single Spur hit more than 1. So they've spread it around at least, I guess. A bunch more to get to here, including a look ahead to the Eastern Conference's Final Four, the Bucks and Celtics for the second straight year. Plus, Joel Embiid will see a much bigger and better defensive group in the Raptors in round 2. What to watch for in those series when we come back.